we hope, as a little channel, and a lot of our supporters hope that there will be a day in court, a day of reckoning, where Dan Andrews and his wife will have to go to court and answer questions. Can you see that somewhere in the future?
I can. I think it's inevitable, actually.
One of the things that really caught us out in the first series and has been mentioned briefly in episode 2 as well is that once you get to a certain rank in Victoria Police, you're actually employed by the government. How can they stay independent?
Well, they can't.
They can't. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's a real problem.
3, 2, 1.
Yesterday, mate, I had the opportunity to sit down with Rohan Wenn from Bikeboy, the true crime podcast, along with Jackson Moon, the producer. And yeah, together they're working so hard on firstly finding some justice and closure and normalcy for Ryan in his life, and also to shine a light on the alleged corruption lies, cover-ups and blackmail that the Victorian state government and its former premier have been involved in over the years.
It's almost funny you say alleged.
Almost funny.
Almost.
I think one day we'll get to a point where it's no longer alleged.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree completely.
I think we're looking forward to seeing that day.
Yep, definitely.
Now, the interview is a bit on the long side, so I've broken it down into chapters, and anybody who wants to watch a particular answer to a particular question, I've put the questions in the description, and also you can skip along on your TV or phone or whatever you've got. It's broken into chapters. But the interview does flow, and to see it in context, you'd sort of need to watch it from start to finish because you learn a little bit of the history of where they came from and what they're hoping to achieve.
For sure.
So why don't we just jump straight in and we'll come together again at the end and have a chat.
Yep, sounds good.
Rohan, thanks very much for joining us today, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Not in the bothy, but no, far nicer surrounds than we've got. But before we jump in, mate, tell us a bit about yourself and what's got you to this point.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I was a journalist initially. I studied politics at university, and then did a journalism degree at Queensland University, Melbourne University for the politics thing, and then I worked at Channel 9 for a bit, and then Channel 7, the ABC for a little bit too. Hosted a kids current affairs show called. No. Did you ever watch a show called Behind the News, BTN, back in the day at school? Okay.
No.
Something like 1.3 million school kids that made to watch the show every week.
Right.
And so we hosted that. I hosted that for a year and a half, and that was fun. That was like trying to make current affairs sort of for the kids level, you know.
Right.
And they sit them down and force them to watch it at school. They used to call it Boring the Nation, BTN.
Right.
Not Behind the News, you know.
Right.
Did that for a bit and then yeah, so I've been doing that. And then I went and a mate of mine, a guy called Nick Xenophon, was running for the Senate, and he rang up and said, Can you come and do media? And I said, listen, I won't do just media. I'll do policy and media because I don't want to be advertising bad policy. So I'll do that with you. But I want to stay in Melbourne. If I can be based in Melbourne and fly up for sitting weeks, we'll do it that way. And said our relationship needs boundaries, and it's going to be the South Australian Victorian border. Right. So I'm going to stay here with my family, and you do your thing, and then we'll meet in Canberra. And then been working with Andrew Wilkie for the last 10 years, helping him with his whistleblower stuff primarily. So the Crown Casino stuff that we did, the Aldi bag full of cash, that was all our investigation that we punted out to the media.
Yeah.
And I'm also helping another independent called Helen Dalton, who's from New South Wales, who's very big on the Murray-Darling Basin and the water issues that affect Victoria as well as New South Wales and Queensland. And and then I sort of got asked to help with this one day, and here we are.
So you've been involved in this now for a number of years.
2022 we started. I was talking to a journo friend of mine from the Herald Sun who was doing some work, and as part of my political work, I occasionally get used to helping whistleblowers and working out how to navigate that. It's very difficult for them because they're worried about getting sued. They're worried about sort of retribution as well. Yep. And they don't know the media. They don't know who they can trust and who they can't trust. So one of the things that we've done, or I've done through the various politicians I've been helping over the years, is helping protect whistleblowers. They try and bring stuff out that's in the public interest. Excuse me, I'm just got a frog in my throat.
You're right.
So anyway, this journo said to me, listen, this family wants to talk, but they're really worried. Could you have a chat to them? And so I did. Because I sort of said to the journo, I think the big scandal's Bikeboy. I think, red shirts is big, but people don't understand it. Most people don't understand how the money should be spent and shouldn't be spent by governments. And obviously, I think there were clearly crimes there and it was a scam, but that's a sort of story for another day. Mm. Whereas everyone knows you don't leave a kid dying and lying on a road. So I said, I'll go and talk to the family. And we went and met Peter Millman and had a chat, and he was very wary. He'd been approached by people before, and I think previously they might have been quite sort of politically extreme people, and I'm not at all. I'm a centrist. I'm not about left or right. I'm about right and wrong, as I like to say. Yep. So it's about just doing the right thing. And I don't really whoever wins the election should win the election based on what the voters want, not on any sort of rigged system, and what the voters want should be supreme in a democracy, I would have thought. So anyway, we went and saw Peter Muhlman, and then he said, my son can't talk. He said he's not able to talk because he signed an agreement. And I said, that's just not true. He said, no, he'll go to jail. I said, no, he won't. Right. But it turns out their lawyers had told Ryan this, and the lawyers, of course, were Slater and Gordon, right? A Labor-affiliated law firm.
Yep.
So then there's your first red flag for me. And I said, well, I better talk to Ryan. So we went and had a chat to him, and he was very nervous initially. And we won their trust and explained that we just want to have a look at what happened. And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. But the more we've looked and the more we've found, the more shocking things have been, actually.
Sure has. Can we jump into some questions about
Mate, knock yourself out.
Series 2?
What do we got?
Yep. Well, first of all, how's Ryan going? How's he coping? This process has been long and drawn out and painful, I would imagine, from the accident to today.
Yeah. Look, when I met Ryan in 2022, he was in a really bad way. He's had a very rough, I think we call it a rough old decade in episode 3 or whatever of the first series. He's had a really rough gig, and he's been gaslit badly for years, to the point where people who he should have been able to trust didn't know what to believe either. So that's been very hard for him. He's by his own admission made some difficult life choices and some poor life choices, but they're but for the grace of God, any of us, given what he went through, So I was pretty sympathetic to young Ryan, and I felt this kid's been totally screwed and he needs a break, So we reached out and tried to find out as much as we could about him. It's helped him, the process has helped him, but it's very stressful, because he's got to listen to defences that contain lies. Yeah. He's got to listen to people saying, again, no, you're a shit person, mate, and you're a liar, and you caused your own crash that nearly killed yourself, so sucks to be you, buddy. And that's killing him, It's the process, unfortunately, of seeking justice can involve a lot of injustice, to the person as they go through it. And look, he has good days and bad days. He is incredibly emboldened by the support he gets from the folk at home. He can't believe how people are listening finally, because no one listened to this kid. It's a classic case of, I don't like to use the word child abuse because it has connotations, but it's emotional abuse what happened to this kid. I mean, to have adults decide to lie about you and force you to go along with that lie in order to benefit themselves, well, that's classic child abuse, right? And that's what's happened to this kid.
Yeah, especially when those adults have the public ear.
And so much power, and trade off that power. They trade off being credible truth tellers, and yet he's known forever they're not. Yeah. And that's really, that's a tough gig for a 15-year-old kid to have to embrace.
Yeah, hard to understand.
Yeah.
So Series 2 is out now of Bikeboy, True Crime Podcast.
Yep.
So the first series went over all of the facts. This series seems to dive a bit deeper into the facts that you discussed in episode or Series 1, and also new facts.
Yeah, well, we've been lucky. I mean, Series 1 was well received. We had hundreds of thousands of people download. I think 600,000 from memory.
It's amazing.
Look, we expected about $40,000 to $50,000, 1,000 people rather, would be a good win for us.
Right.
But to have this sort of stuff, we couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And there was a real appetite for it.
Yeah.
And look, we made a very conscious decision to not be political, in the sense that we wanted to make this a crime podcast, not a political podcast, because when you make it about politics, people choose sides, right?
Yeah.
And no one should have a side against justice, right? So all we were trying to do was look at an alleged crime and see what we could find. And we're very, very lucky to have the investigators helping us with that. They've done a lot of work, but also by doing the podcast, we've managed to attract some seriously good new whistleblowers and people with new information. So people have come forward and gone, listen, mate, I've been sitting on this for 10 years, but here's something else you need to know. Or here's a document I'd like you to read or see or get out there, and that will happen too. Because there's a lot of people who were around at the time who are deeply disturbed by what's taken place. And having seen Ryan's true story and what's happened to him, they can't live with the information covering up anymore,
So this series is being presented differently. The first one came out all together. Yep. This one's week by week, and it's exciting. Every week you go and digest a new episode. Yep. How many episodes have we got in this series?
I've written the first 6, and we are planning to do 12 to 13 at this point, but it'll grow as more people will come forward, and it already is. So I've had to change what we're doing with some of the stuff with Jackson Moon, who's our producer, and I. We talk about what we're going to be doing and what the next episode is going to be. It's kind of flexible, and it's a bit like it's back when I was reporting. You do a story, and then somebody come forward, and you do another story, and somebody come forward, and just sort of it's very organic. It's like your interviews. Yeah, it just sort of grows, and I think this will be the same thing. I'm pretty excited about this series, and it's going to be quite controversial, but it shouldn't be, because it's actually just the truth, and we can prove it.
That's right. It's evidence-based, right?
Correct. Ultimately, I'm a journo, right? And I won't say anything unless I can prove it.
Yeah.
And that's always been our test, and we've had to be very careful because defamation laws and what have you.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I don't want to ever let these guys get the people at home be misled by anything we do. So I'm a bit brutal about that, and so's Jackson. We've got some theories, but I don't do theories. We've got to be able to prove it. Otherwise I'm not going to waste your time thinking about it, because misdirection is the worst thing you can do for an audience. I think.
I've watched episode 2. I watched it yesterday when it came out. There was talk of blackmail. There's the talk of lies, cover-ups, corruption. What can we look forward to in the series as this unfolds?
Look, we're going to be presenting. I'll be a little bit careful now.
Absolutely.
But we're going to be presenting credible evidence and sworn evidence that the crash has been used to achieve a political outcome for an organisation that shouldn't have had that outcome necessarily without the use of the evidence around the crash. So there's long been, I think I say in episode 2, it's the worst kept secret. Probably not everyone knows this, but people involved in politics have heard this and they've been told this, and the smoking gun evidence has never been there necessarily, or it has been, but maybe it's been in the hands of other people for a long time. But we've got somebody who's provided us with some pretty stunning information that I think will cause people to think about it and have another look. And I suspect if it's true, it will absolutely it'll put everything else in perspective. You'll look at the last 10 years in Victorian politics very differently if what we're being told is true turns out to be true.
It's amazing. A lot of people comment on our videos when we do something on Dan, and it feels more and more that a lot of those people that are throwing those comments out, those comments are bearing fruit. It's almost like what people have guessed is coming into reality. So,
well, people hear things, and look, sometimes there's a lot of bullshit out there, but there's often a lot of truth, and it's our job to work out what's true and what's not.
Exactly right. Yep.
And as I said, I'm very evidence driven, because I just think you get it wrong once, you're wrong forever, sort of thing. Yep. So you need to make sure you're right. And I've been pretty cautious about this particular storyline, but I've had lawyers come and pull me aside and say, mate, here's what you need to know. I've had political contacts.
Yep.
Coppers, everyone's pushing in the one direction, and I've said, well, I can't prove it. And now it looks like we might have some proof. So
from the evidence and the statements you've received, it would be your opinion that the government has altered decisions or been blackmailed or have discussions about changing their
It's been alleged
policies?
It's been alleged that the government has made certain policy decision for the wrong reasons, because they were being coerced to do so, because people had dirt.
Right.
It's simple as that.
Right.
If you have a scandal, you leave yourself vulnerable when you're a politician. Now, this is a pretty big scandal.
Yeah.
So who knew about it and what did they use it for?
Yeah. Mainstream media have recently brought up the IBAC report into Operation Richmond. Does that get a run at any stage, do you think, in your...
We're looking at that. We're definitely looking at that. I have, for a long time, thought it was as dodgy as a $3 bill that they hadn't reported yet. Where's the report?
It's been a long time.
Correct.
Yeah.
And look, everyone knows what it's about. So the question is, why the delay? And yes, there's a lot of money and a lot of lawyers and a lot of powerful people, but I'm a firm believer that the voters need to know about things before they vote, and they should know about this. I strongly believe that. Now, they've just said recently that the results will come out from IBAC in July, I think, or at the start of the
end of financial year.
Yeah. That'll be interesting reading, whether it's...
Heavily redacted, I'm imagining.
Well, do you know what? This is the concern. This is the concern. I mean, enough people know what IBAC's been told. What they report on will be very interesting, and if it's a whitewash, we'll know straight away, and there's plenty of other ways to get to the truth if IBAC don't do the right thing, I would imagine. Yeah. But I don't want to sort of slag off IBAC. They might do a great job. Who knows? Let's wait and see.
Yeah. Hopefully the new commissioner or the commissioner in place now.
Well, look, I feel I've got a bit of, Redlick and the gang at IBAC, I've got a lot of sympathy for them, because they really were trying to fight with their hands tied behind their back by Daniel Andrews, who changed the laws when he came in. And there's actually an episode about that we're coming up, I think, in Ep 7 or 8. There's going to be a look at a deep dive into the changes that Andrews made the minute he got in to make it impossible for IBAC to do their job. We have got the most pathetic corruption regime in the country compared to everybody else. In New South Wales, they actually take down corrupt politicians, and here they get away with murder.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
The relationship between Dan Andrews and the Bikeboy case with the mainstream media has fluctuated heavily over the years, and recently, especially from one of the Victorian newspapers, it's almost turned back toward Dan Andrews. Why? What's going on there? What's the relationship like?
The age stuff?
Yeah.
Look, I don't know about that. I've got theories, but again, I like the evidence, not theories, and I have a bit of evidence too, actually, because I know some folk who work in that newspaper as well. But I would say this. The reason why we did the podcast is because we've been working on this since 2022, and the media's been following some stuff that we've been able to help them with, but no one really understood, even knew bits and pieces of the story. And we got to the point where I said, do you know what? We actually we tried to get somebody else to do it. Like I was talking to lots of different media companies to say, why don't you just do the one big definitive, everything we know so far story? And sort of there weren't really any takers. And we pushed that pretty hard. So I said, bugger it, let's just do it ourselves. We'll do a podcast. And I was trying to get somebody else to host it because I really didn't want to get in front of the camera again after years of leaving TV, But eventually I had to do it. So reluctantly I've done the podcast, and I'm glad I've done it now because I think we had to have that summary. And that was the point. Now, I suspect that, and the Herald Sun's run a lot of it, Sky's done a bit of it, 10, 7 have done stuff, which is great. The Age took a different angle. I don't know whether they're doing that because they're fighting with the Herald Sun, who's running the story about the crash, and they're trying to do the story behind the story, which is legitimate, except it's the stuff they've been reporting is horseshit, you know, and trying to smear us and pretend that we're bribing witnesses. I mean, give me a break. Yeah. That related to a lawyer who we had to sack, basically, or its family had to sack because they were concerned that he was acting without instruction. And there's strong evidence that was the case. So he's had a big slag off in the South Australian courts because he wants to get paid, which he won't get paid. And the family tell me he won't get paid. I'm not making the decision, of course, but the family are adamant that he didn't do the work. He was here to raise his own money for the case and was going to do the right thing. None of that happened, And then there were billing issues and what have you. So the Age has picked that up, run that. They didn't run our defences, which would have balanced the story out, I feel that the stories represented a view that I don't think most people would share. Let me put it that way. And so look, people have agendas. I don't know whether they were fighting with the Herald Sun, whether they thought that we were it could have come from Labor Central, the storyline, And there are people who, I think that some journalists don't want to touch this story because they kind of miss this story. This thing's been sitting around for 10 years. If it turns out that the bloke who ran the state and locked up 6.4 million people should have been locked up before he even became Premier, that's a story.
Should never have got into office.
Well, that's right, if that's true, right? Yeah. And I suspect it possibly could be. Yeah. Right? Now,
imagine where we'd all be now if that had happened.
Well, this is right. I think I say that to Scotty in Ep 2. I say, could you imagine Victoria if this hadn't happened? Now, I'm not a big believer in sliding doors. What happens, happened, So you got to live with the reality that you got. But, that's a hell of a story. And back in the day, and I hate back in the day people, but I know that we'd be chasing this story 10 years ago or 20 years ago because we didn't care. We were reckless, and the media was very strong. We had lots of money. We could do it with how we wanted. Now, the media's pretty weak, unfortunately. There's not a lot of money. Advertising budgets are gone. Politicians, I believe, have much more control over the media bosses than they used to because they're all very dependent. If you go back to the glory days of TV in the 90s and 2000s, we could just do whatever we wanted and no one could stop you, and you could burn politicians and you should be able to. That's how democracy is meant to work. If you're dodgy, I should be able to call you dodgy on behalf of the people watching. That's just how democracy should work. It's less so now, and unfortunately we don't pay journos like we used to, so you've got these younger people that don't have the mentors above them because they've all gone to work in PR. So there's no one training the younger kids, so it's not as good as it was, unfortunately, for them, and I feel for those kids. But having said all that, there are still awesome people out there that are committed to the truth, and I'm not the guy who slags off the mainstream media because, trust me, come to China and Russia and let's talk about how important the mainstream media is. We have...
It's even the USA, mate. You look at Fox and CNN, you can't watch them balanced. So.
I was in Washington in 2024, and I watched some of the programming and gone, no wonder they're dysfunctional. Like it's almost schizophrenic in the messaging they're getting. And as much as people slag off the public broadcaster, and don't get me wrong, there's lots to complain about in the commercials and the public broadcaster. But thank God we've got a diversity of voice and some kind of central sort of narrative going on because that's otherwise you have divided countries. So social media is great. There's a lot of crap out there too, but it's good that we've got it. Mainstream media is good, can do better. We all can,
And judge what you get and where you get it from.
And look, the Age story is just to finish off on that. Look, they had a hit, and I'm not against scrutiny. Have a go. Just make it factual.
So I was going to double back to that. It's exactly where I was coming back to. So the Age, just for the record, did the Age approach you guys for rebuttal of anything that they were going to report? Or
we weren't told the full allegations, and I actually, on the second day, said, listen, give me a list of the actual questions you want me to address. And there was still stuff in the article I hadn't been asked. And we've made a complaint to the Press Council, right? Yeah. And a formal complaint. We've sent through the texts to say, well, listen, here's how the journo engaged. It was just, it's fairly sloppy. And clearly there was the story that I believe wanted to be reported.
Yeah.
And you sort of shoehorn the facts in and ignore the ones that don't help. You know, that's what appeared to me happen.
Yeah.
So we've just gone to the Press Council. Listen, you guys have a look. Here's all the evidence. Here's all my texts. Here's all her responses. Make your own decision. Now, we've sent that complaint in 2 weeks ago. Haven't had a response yet, I don't believe, have we? No, we haven't had a response yet. So, that's concerning, but it needs to be looked at. And, if you want to hold me up for scrutiny, do it. But same for you too.
Yeah, it's going to run both ways.
Your conduct as a journo will be scrutinised as well.
Yeah. So there were some baseless comments made in that article. So,
yeah.
Paying witnesses, tens of thousands of dollars, that sort of stuff.
Well, expert witnesses you have to pay because they are expert witnesses and they all get paid, and they have been. And it's cost us. That's why we're doing the donations and asking people to donate, because we've got no money, right?
Yeah.
So that GoFundMe was very important to pay people like Dr. Ray Shuey for his work before he passed away. That's standard practice, and and that's what people
we
saying.
We employed him, so
that's right. He was engaged to do it on behalf of the family. In terms of the police stuff, that just wasn't true. And they weren't witnesses anyway. And if you look at I'm very familiar with the transcript of the interview that she conducted with Greg, right? And if you look at it, she led him to that question, right? And he just said yes, right? Because he could see the story that was going to be written anyway. And he was trying to harm us, right? He was trying to just do some brand damage because he's got hurt feelings because he got kicked off the case, Okay. So totally baseless, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
And you know what annoys? I don't mind you having to go at me, right? I couldn't care less, right? But you're actually hurting Ryan. And that's when I get angry, right? Yeah. This kid, he's starting to see justice and he's going, they're rigging it again. Yeah. And I had to talk to him and say, mate, no, it's fine. This is what's going to happen. We're throwing big punches. People are going to throw some punches back. That's just the way things work here, And I don't really care if they have a go at us. But trying to get him to believe in the system is very hard because he's been so screwed by the system. Yeah. When these sort of things happen, he goes, they're rigging it again,
Yeah. Without going into too much obvious detail because it's in front of the courts, where's the case at? What can people expect to see in the next little bit?
This is the defamation case you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I want to just make the point clearly, we are separate from that. That is a separate thing the family are doing, and we absolutely, the family absolutely respects the independence of the court. We're not trying to do anything to affect that.
Yeah.
The defo case, it's it's public record that there's a hearing in May, and the Herald Sun reported recently, I think, based on the court documents, that Ryan's now arguing that it's malicious defamation. So they knew what they were saying wasn't true, and they've asked for a hearing, I believe, to try and analyse whether, in fact, scrutinise whether that is the case, that they didn't know, that they knew that the car crash didn't happen the way they were saying, and by saying those things, they defamed Ryan, but they knowingly defamed him. Now that'll be very interesting because it's the first time that Kath and Dan, I believe, will be asked to justify their comments about how they describe the crash. And I look forward to seeing how they do that.
We hope, as a little channel, and a lot of our supporters hope, that there will be a day in court, a day of reckoning, where Dan Andrews and his wife will have to go to court and answer questions. Can you see that somewhere in the future?
I can. I think it's inevitable, actually. I think whether it's the defo case or whether it might be something that happens with allegations of criminality in relation to the statements to police that were signed by them, which appear to be false if you look at the evidence provided by the investigators who were working for the family. And there's a lot of interest amongst the ranks of Victoria Police about that, and we're starting to hear some interest upstairs too.
Yeah. VicPol, in Series 1 you talk about presenting evidence to the Commissioner, the new Commissioner, Mike Bush. Where's that at? Is that...
Well, look, to give Mike credit, right, we were going to present it all, right, but we've had to hold back for that because we're getting more evidence, and so we only want to do it in one big go. Yeah. Having said that, Scott, I think, feels that they should have reached out as well, and I respect Scott's position on that. So the phone's always on. They know how to find us.
Yeah.
But also they should be looking at their own stuff anyway. I suspect that there's some tension in the higher ranks of Victoria Police because there are some people that don't want this looked at, and there hopefully is a Chief Commissioner who does want to look at it. So I'm not at all having a go at Mike Bush. I still hear good things about him. I still hear very good things about him. And when you come in from a different country and you've got senior police that have their own agendas, it's going to be very hard to work out what to do.
Yeah. Who to trust, who to listen to.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the rule of law should be the rule of law. And that's really why the podcast is so important, right? It's one thing for us to send through a file of stuff, but if everyone knows about it, it's a lot harder to make it go away.
Does it make it a lot harder with the assistant commissioner's position or role at the moment? Yeah, he was working for the police, then he was working for Dan Andrews, and now he's back at the police force. Does that make it harder?
You're talking about Brett Curran?
Yeah.
Look, people have genuine concerns about Brett Curran's close relationship with Labor. I think Ep 3 we deal with that, unless it was Ep 2. I'm not sure. I'm forgetting which episode in the new series. But certainly it was Ep 2. Yeah, series 2, yeah. I'm forgetting my stuff, aren't I? It's terrible. No. But anyway, look, that is problematic, and that will become, we're exploring that even further in oncoming episodes. It does seem unique for him to be able to move back and forth between the political party and then into an assistant commissioner role. And it's, I've got to tell you, it doesn't sit well with a lot of the rank and file coppers.
Absolutely. One of the things that really caught us out in the first series and has been mentioned briefly in episode 2 as well is that once you get to a certain rank in Victoria Police, you're actually employed by the government. How can they stay independent?
Well, they can't.
They can't,
yeah.
Exactly.
And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
I think. Look, it's the same way, why is the Premier choosing the Chief Commissioner? It should be chosen by Parliament.
Yes.
Parliament represents the people, better than the Premier does. And if you give the Premier that power, I mean, there was a time not so long ago when you'd have Chief Commissioners who would never do a press conference standing next to a politician. Now, they do it all the time.
Yeah.
They're meant to be independent.
Yeah.
And the government of the day should not be running the police in any active way. But unfortunately, if you're making a couple of $100,000 as an assistant commissioner, and you're not going to get that money anywhere else, you tend to toe the line.
Yeah, you do what you're told.
Sadly, it appears. And look, I'm not slagging all ACs off. I don't want to tar around with the same brush, but you've got to look at systems and say, well, this system allows itself to be exploited if you're not careful. So maybe we should have a better system.
So what's the aim of the podcast? You've done series 1, now you're doing series 2. What are you hoping to get back from this, either for the family or for yourselves?
Good question. Look, we did the first series as a summary of all the evidence that we've gathered for the last few years. Now, a whole bunch of stuff's coming forward that's really pointing us in one direction. The investigators are adamant that there are crimes that should be investigated, and if VicPol decides, somebody who's independent in VicPol decides to pursue it. We're also looking at the Liberals of pushing for a royal commission. It's actually their policy to have a royal commission into the CFMEU. My argument's been, well, why would you stop with that bit of corruption, right? If there's a bit more, go and have a look at red shirts, go and have a look at Bikeboy, because I think Victoria needs a reset, and we want to believe in our systems again. And so I think you're not going to be able to achieve that unless you have a bit of a clean out, So there's a couple of ways to do it. I mean, I would hope that, somebody in VicPol, Mike Bush particularly, sees the credibility of the work that's been done by the investigators. And some of this stuff is just, if you listen to episode 3 and you look at the police statements, for example, which is coming out this Wednesday.
Yeah.
Or maybe, when's this come out, by the way, your thing?
I'm going to put this on Saturday.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, so the Wednesday, a couple of days' time, the Wednesday will be Ep 3. If you look at the way that police statement was made, I mean, it'd be funny if it wasn't so serious. It's just an absolute scam of how that happened. And when you hear that episode, you're going to go, well, there goes any sort of appearance of an investigation being done correctly is just out the window. So something will have to happen. And that's why it's so important that people share. And I'm not pushing the podcast to try and get the numbers up, but the more people who know about what's going on, the more harder it's going to be for people not to do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that I've always believed this. The Australian people, we have pretty good values, regardless of whether you're left or right. Like, if you present people with the evidence, they almost always come out on the right side. And actually, you know what? That's not okay. We call it the pub test all the time, and it's colloquial, but it's good.
Yeah.
Aussies don't do bullshit.
Yeah.
So if we see that there's bullshit going on, we say, cut that out, fix that up.
Yeah.
And I think this is just the case of that.
Yeah. Can you pass on our best to Ryan and the family?
Yeah, mate,
I can't even imagine what they've been through. I really can't. And it doesn't feel like it's any easier just because they're finally getting to court. So we are rooting for them, and we want to see them earn some justice, get some
Thanks,
justice.
Chris. Yeah.
So.
Mate, I can't tell you how much better Ryan is doing because the folk at home and people like yourself care. This is a I keep saying kid, he's not a kid anymore, but he kind of is, in the sense that he's been affected by this and it's sort of trapped him in a certain place in his life, but having people listen to him and respect him And respect him is key. Talking to lawyers who listen to him and take him seriously now. You know, we've got some really good lawyers working on the Defo case, for example, and I've seen a change in him. And to me, that's the most rewarding part of this. Yep. Yes, it would be great to put some baddies in jail, right? But even helping Ryan just get his life back on track, to me, that's reason enough, you know?
Live a normal life like everybody else. That's all people want out of this.
Totally.
Is to see Ryan get back to a space in his life where he's happy and content.
Totally, yeah. I mean, and look, he's better than he was. You know, so people need to take some credit for that if they've reached out and shown him they respect what he's doing. Good. This stuff counts.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah,
good stuff.
You too.
Thank you.
And we'll get this out to the people.
Excellent. And we'll keep you posted about what happens next.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. So there you go, mate.
Yeah, it was really good.
It is interesting. So many of our watchers over the year or so that we've been talking about this subject have come forward with their theories about the high-up police.
And how close have they been?
They've been almost spot on, mate.
Very close.
Yep. And there's still ones that haven't been proven yet, but you feel like
they could be
any minute. Exactly right.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, I mean, some of the ideas that came out, I was like, nah, surely not.
No. Corrupt police. What are you talking about? Should have known better.
But now I'm looking at it going, I'd be surprised if it wasn't the way they suggested.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which shouldn't be the case.
The one that keeps coming up over and over again, there's two things that have kept coming up this year. The first is that he wasn't ill, that was faked. Everybody on our channel said that. Now, we believe he was ill, but he's recovered.
Yeah.
All the power to him. The second one is who was driving the vehicle, mate. That is the one, because if it comes out ever that he was driving the vehicle, that is any shred of integrity left, gone.
I mean,
it's just a pity there was no witness that saw.
Or maybe there was. Who knows?
Who knows? Well, who knows? Yeah.
But, you know, he does like a drink.
Yes.
So.
And if he was driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where did they come from? They'd come from
the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, I don't know about you, but I like to have a beer at a beach.
You like to have a beer?
Yeah.
I also am partial to a beer.
Yeah.
And a glass of wine.
And a glass of red. Yeah, for sure.
But we don't do that and then get in the car.
Not with my kids.
The point of all of that I keep coming back to is, and it's already been discussed in this series, is that when Catherine went back to the car, she got in the passenger seat, mate. If she'd driven there,
I know it kind of doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
It suggests that seat was where she was sitting.
Yeah.
Suggests. Who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe
we just
not.
Don't know. Exactly right. Rohan stated that after the first series went to air, the whistleblowers started coming forward left, right and centre, mate. So some of them were in relation to the case and others have been in relation to alleged blackmail, cover-ups, lies. And if there's one thing that we believe this government's good at, it's telling us a porky, right?
And cover-ups.
And cover-ups, exactly right. Blackmail's a really strong word, but if people that believe they knew the truth were using that accident to hold it over the government and get what they wanted,
then, why wouldn't you?
I cannot wait to see the IBAC report.
I'm very excited about. See, I just hope to God they've done a proper. I hope there's proper results. I hope they haven't done a Swiftie and just.
It's really interesting because Channel 9 put an article out on their website that stated that Dan Andrews was under investigation for the Labor government paying the United Firefighters Union $3.4 million as a gift.
As a gift.
And within 48 hours, that article had been taken down.
Yeah, that's a bit sus.
I hope that's in the IBAC. That's nothing to do with what we just watched, but I hope that's in the IBAC report.
Yep.
And if this IBAC report comes out and even, again, it has a whiff of cover-up, blackmail, lies, deception, then we know these people have lied right through. And it just gives all those people that believe that we shouldn't have been locked down, shouldn't have been given curfews, all of that, it gives them more power, mate. The one thing that Rohan stated that I love is he can't see a way where Dan Andrews doesn't end up in court for something.
Let's just hope he's correct in his assumption, because that would bring so much joy to so many people.
Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's defamation. It'd be great if it's criminal.
Yep.
just get him in the seat
Yep.
and make him tell the truth, or better still, make him lie under oath and then catch him out.
That would be even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he gets to end up in the proper big house.
Yes.
Not the government
That would
big house.
that would be the perfect ending to the man's
Career.
yeah.
I won't say criminal career, alleged criminal career.
Yeah.
What I would say is we're all held to account, right?
Yep.
But our leaders have to be above the law, mate. They have to be. They have to be held to a higher account than the rest of us. They have to be beyond reproach. And the more this goes on, the more it seems that is not the case here.
Well, you did say above the law.
Yeah. Well, he holds himself above the law, potentially. Yeah.
So
allegedly.
Unfortunately, that's what they believe. They believe they are above the law, and that's why they do all the shit they do to us.
Yeah.
Because whatever they do to us, they're not. It doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
Because,
Me and thee.
Yeah. It's you and it's us. Yeah. That's what it's like.
Exactly right. So if you look back at the horrid events, we've talked about a couple of these that unfolded during the Andrews reign. You got lockdowns, you got curfews, you got the red shirts, potentially underhanded dealings with unions. Legislation changed to make it harder to be investigated as a politician. And other things like Dan Andrews brought in that assist greasing the politicians' pockets. I mean, you only have to read what's been written in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, Jacinda Allen has pocketed almost $300,000 in 6 years.
That is sickening.
Toward her investment property mortgage.
That beggars belief, me. That I can't believe that. That is just ridiculous.
That on the back of a law or a legislation that Dan Andrews brought in as we went into COVID and we knew the government had no money. Oh, by the way, let's give all the politicians an allowance that they can just claim even if they're not living in that house.
Is it hush money? Is it like...
No, and it's not just Labor that get it. It's every politician.
That's so wrong, mate.
It is. Absolutely a joke.
One rule for them, and then there's the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, everyone was suffering.
Yep.
Well, everybody was working less hours potentially and losing their jobs because they wouldn't get the jab or whatever the reason might be. These people are finding a way to pay themselves an extra 50 grand a year.
Living it up,
Come on. So the day of reckoning may well be coming, mate.
Oh, we can only hope, mate.
We can
only hope.
We cannot wait, can we, mate?
No. I will have a party that day.
Oh, let's.
If it happens.
A Buffy party.
Yeah.
Should we do a live show? We'll do a live show.
Well, us just hanging out here getting drunk.
Okay. Sounds good. But then not driving.
Not driving.
No. We would never do that. No, exactly right. All right, everyone, let us know what you think. The day of reckoning is coming. Let's all celebrate it when it comes.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
See ya.